Hello everyone, back again with some more evaluation. This time, current model, Triumph 1200 Rally Pro. So a little bit of ADV riding evaluation while we're in New Zealand because of course, prime territory for going off-road, especially on the South Island. We're going to take a look at this particular model. You can see we have wires going into the forks. So this is obviously an electronic suspension model. So we're going to evaluate each mode, what the damping gives us, and what environment that damping is going to be good for. We have a fob, so it's a proximity key, so we're going to keep it out of the way on the passenger seat, but we're going to actually get into the menu. So at this point, we'll go ahead, turn it on. So double click on the kill switch, we'll fire up the dash. Okay, now we have a mode button here and then our menu button down here. So for the mode, right now you can see there are various modes: road, sport, with TCS, sport, suspension, off-road 5 of 9. So what it's trying to do is give you options and summaries. So if we toggle, now we know we're on off-road. Now we have off-road pro, which is a different setting altogether, and we'll go through that in a minute. Then we have the individual rider setting, rain, road, and sport. So I'm going to select sport. And in selecting it, all we want to do is evaluate. The ECU is telling the suspension and the damping where to set the needle in the orifice, in principle. That's how it works. So for sport, you don't want to be the adult and manifest something by physically making it happen. So we'll be in the 7-year-old through this entire process and going and discovering. Sport gives us a damping setting. What is it? Well, sport on a brand new motorcycle gives us a perfectly balanced road bike. Perfectly balanced with brand new oil. That's interesting. Okay, so now let's change our modes. Let's go down to off-road. Let's select off-road and see what it does. So first thing is the stepper motor on the rear shock is changing the position of the bike. So we need to measure that in a minute. But right now we're just going through the damping curves. So off-road. Generally for off-road, you want the back to come up slow and the front to dance. That's just a general principle of setup. We don't get that. So for the off-road portion, what we're getting, especially in the back, is a lot of suspension movement, a lot, and the front less. Typically for off-road, it will be the other way around. So there's that evaluation. Now let's switch modes again. Go to Off-Road Pro. Now in Off-Road Pro, let's see if there's a physical difference. So it's lowering the back even more, which would be really smart because Off-Road Pro means let's throw rocks out the back and get as much traction as we can. To do that, we need to lower the back down. So in terms of the stepper motor drop in the rear, we have a second drop. Again, makes sense for a generic setup principle. Is there any change in the damping for the off-road? No. So while the geometry of the motorcycle is changed via the preload setting in the ECU, the damping isn't changed at all. Interesting. Okay. So our next mode is rider mode. So we'll select that. Stepper motor didn't change. Interesting, because now I'm assuming we are off-road at this. We're onto a more of a road setting if rider, so that's curious as to why the stepper motor didn't kick in. Still bouncy. And then finally, rain. So let's select rain. It's less bouncy than the off-road by one full down, up, and down. So it's actually a little more balanced in the rain mode. So now, let's put it back in sports. Select. And again, the stepper motor didn't kick yet. So am I in sport? Sport, select. That's different, we didn't want that. Okay, stepper motor didn't go, so we'll put it back in sport. So it changed the damping, but interestingly did not kick the back of the bike up where it was originally in sport. So is that suggesting that the damping works with the key or the fob, but the actual preload, which changed without the engine running, needs to have the engine running to change it back. So there's the first run through on specifics relating to the modes that are available and the damping curves that show themselves in those modes. Now we have another option within that menu. So we have, if we go into the menu, there it goes. Okay. So in moving the selection around with the toggle switch, we can get it back to sport and back to road. So there's no intuitive pathway here using the settings. You have to use the mode and then go into the toggle and select via the toggle. Not difficult, just a process. Everything has its uniqueness. And once you learn the process, it's pretty straightforward. So easy enough. Now, within each mode, we have on the dash an escalating tier of settings. At the bottom is comfort all the way up to sport. Now each mode has this option. So each mode you can custom configure what you want per mode using this. And that's pretty standard amongst most bikes with electronic suspension because you just want to push mode and have everything preset. There's a lot more presets in there, but we're just talking about suspension for now. So at this point, let's evaluate what we get. So we're at, let's go one down to minimum, select it. Okay, so now let's bounce it. So that is your, absolutely your off-road setting. So now let's toggle up to normal. Now we get a preload change at normal. Now let's bounce it. So that's much closer to your rain setting in terms of the preset for suspension. And now let's move it all the way up to the top for sport. Select it. Now, if you go to the maximum of the of your bars here, so what's that? 2, 4, 6, 8, bar number 9. That's way over damped. But again, this is a new bike. So at that, optimally, well, don't just say it's over damped. What's going to be right? So let's drop it 3 and test it. The back drops over just a bit. Go back up one. So that would be, for me, if I was touring, probably 3 from the top would be a very nice, plush, comfortable setting. But the back would want to oscillate a little bit. So for me in cornering, especially if I'm on back roads, I don't want the back of the bike sitting down and doing that to the bars. So I'd probably be 2 from the top. But again, we have no load. So we have nothing on the back of the bike. The more load we put here, the more stress there is on the suspension. And the suspension and load comes here. So it's a big breaker bar just leveraging the shock. So the question is going to be, if this is fully loaded with a human and full luggage, can Sport maximum damping cope with all the weight? And what would the sag be with it fully loaded? Is it going to cope with that actual load? Now, obviously, in the manual, there's a load rating, and it will tell you how much weight the bike can hold. The question is, while it can hold that weight, can the damping support all that weight? Given what we're seeing now, 5,000 Ks maybe, will the suspension go in Sport from down, up, stop to down, up, full over again? So we've lost in just a few thousand K the ability to get that perfectly balanced road setting. And without testing it and taking it that far, we don't know. Depends also how aggressive the user is on the road. If they take it off-road, then the oil is going to get hammered because there's so much speed of movement. And dirt bikes are serviced in hours, not kilometers. So then you do 50-50 road off-road, then there's a question of when is that damping for the road going to disappear? Is it going to be 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 Ks? At that point, now you're into just this gentle oscillation of up, down, with the back being more pronounced. So from just opening the dash up and going through the modes, that's what we can find on the settings. All right, now let's take another in-depth look at the summary that the dash gives us. So in rider mode, we have ABS. The map is road, which we're going to assume without the manual is power. You have traction control, and then suspension setting is 2 of 9. So that tells you on the bar, or the blocks that we went up where we're at, that's rain. For road, ABS, map again road, TCS Sport, suspension 5 of 9. So it's firming the suspension up in your default, which again, we went into, which we can preset. For Sport, we still have ABS, map, TCS, and suspension in the mode preset is 9 of 9. So it's maximum. So that's interesting that Sport would go straight to the top of the tree. And then off-road suspension, we still have the same categories, but 5 of 9. Now off-road, you generally want to be softer. So I'm curious why the preset for off-road is 5, which will really firm up the rear. We're trying to get the rear down, but when you think about it, if the stepper motor drops the rear of the bike down, you're going to increase the leverage on the shock. Why wouldn't you increase the damping in the shock to cope with the fact that it's lowered down? Then you go to Off-Road Pro and it's lower, even lower, then you would expect that damping curve to go up to compensate for the increased leverage because the back of the bike's so much lower. So if you step away conceptually and just think that through, rather than just look at the numbers and go, huh? It makes a lot more sense why the off-road number there is higher. It would have to be logically because the bike has so much weight transfer gone from the front of the bike to the back. So looking through your presets, you can see where you're at, and based on those presets, then you can go into each mode and change to the number you want specifically for each mode, which is nice because then you just push in the mode button and all your presets work for you because they're all memorized. and you just literally change the presets as you're riding. That's a great feature to have because it makes riding in variable and mixed conditions, road, off-road, take a gravel road, you just push the button. One of the beauties of electronic suspension, everything can be preset where you want it. It's going to take you some time to figure out what you actually want, but when you just bought a motorcycle, why wouldn't you go test ride it and figure it all out? So lots of adaptation, lots of damping range, so a very versatile 1200 Rally Pro. In playing with the dash and playing with the settings, the best thing we can do now as we scroll through the menus and modes is now reset everything to default to actually truly see what the factory gives us. So these would be out of the box settings off the showroom floor. So your sport is actually 8 of 9 versus me playing around with the damping to see what we would get at 9 of 9. If we move on to off-road with the preload drop, then 5 of 9 is your setting for off-road, which again makes sense because you have the bike lowered. Off-road Pro is 8 of 9. Now think that through. Off-road Pro, that means frequent flyer miles. You're going to take this bike and you're not going to keep it on a gravel road. You're probably going to get 2 to 3 seconds of airtime and put it down again. Nothing stupid, of course, because it's a big heavy bike. You can't go nuts on an MX track with it. So it would make sense for an off-road Pro to have that setting at 8 of 9. So 5 of 9 off-road, off-road Pro 8 of 9, and single rider, basic default setting 5 of 9, which is right in the middle. So all of that makes sense with the factory defaults. And then rain, because they're anticipating you will slow down because of the conditions and having ridden through 2 cyclones in 10 days in New Zealand before, I would like softer suspension to cope with rivers coming over the road. So 2 of 9 makes perfect sense to me because then there's lots of suspension movement, so that's fine. So those are all your factory defaults that you can go in and customize per mode to get what you want. Now we've only done suspension, but there's lots of other things that you can go ahead and get into. When you do get deep into the dash, specifically for each mode, it will say default or it will say edited. Edited means you have preset everything where you want it, and then it's memorized by the computer. So you have to go in, save your settings, go back into the dash to that section under the settings menu, and then go find, does it say edited or does it say default? If it says default, you did not save the settings that you just put in. So use that as a quick check before you go off. Don't make the assumption that everything was saved. Again, with anything electronic, it's just a couple of buttons, just a few clicks through the menu to make sure what you preset is saved so that when you ride, you can feel the difference. Now, sadly, realistically, this is my last day. I have been offered the ability to go ride this and test all the modes. It's pouring down rain. Am I going to go do and test and data gather everything the bike needs? I'm not. So if you're going to take a bike like this and you're going to go on a rally, don't you dare the morning of get up and go, yeah, maybe I'll do this. In all the classes I teach, if you are going on a trip, dry run it, load up, get a friend around with a tape measure, check the sag, check the settings, go for a test ride. You're going to change pressures fully loaded compared to the default that comes for a solo rider. So make sure if you are going to go test, that is a pre-planned experience because you have to get the research and the information done. How long is it going to take? Probably 40 minutes, maybe an hour. But at least then when you're going on a 2, 3, 4 day trip, everything is preset through knowledge acquired versus testing, stopping. No, oh, that was stupid. Let's change it to this. You don't really have the time for that. You need all your attention on the road, all your attention where you're going. So don't experiment while you're in the middle of something. Take your time to test. Give yourself, if you want, an hour, hour and a quarter to just run through the modes and see how it behaves. At least then you've got a solid data bank of experience to leverage. Now we have a preload feature where it needs to work based on, you get this setting for sport, you get this height for off-road, and it seems to have a 2-stage. So in researching the bike, if we run the bike, irrespective of the mode we choose, you can put it all the way up to 9 of 9, and you can drop it to 1 of 9, and the back of the bike will actually drop considerably. Now, measured, fully extended in sport, it's 730 millimeters. So that is on the side stand. For the rest of the world that doesn't use millimeters, 28 3/4 inches. That's what it is in sport, fully extended on the kickstand. Now, there's a little bit more here, obviously, with static sag, but what we're trying to measure is what is the physical drop that it gives us. Now, obviously, the engine's going to drown me out. So we took a shot of the dash. In showing that when you change the dash, you get a warning on the dash that shock is changing. So that comes up and it gives you a pictorial representation that, hey, this is happening, which is fantastic. So now we're going to put it in sport, fully extended. We'll focus on the tape measure. I'll take it from 9 of 9 to 1 of 9, and you'll see it drop on the tape measure. Well, 728, roughly, and I'm going to keep that the same. Now I'm going to drop it all the way down. So you can see the difference that we get with the geometry of the back of the bike. If I had an extra few days, it would have been great to take the 1200 Rally Pro out and actually play with the settings. And if I could have squeaked it in today because it wasn't pouring down rain, I might have been a cheeky bugger and taken it just to go up Silverstream and Whiteman's Valley, just to test the modes out alone and be able to give you some feedback on that. Having the electronics suspension adjustable via mode and preset is really nice, especially when you're touring, because the last thing you want to do is get off, get tools out, change settings, and monkey around with it. The advent and the extension of electronic suspension on multiple bikes now is great for those that just want to be able to pick a mode, preset each mode, and move between riding environments by switching the mode button around while they ride, which is great. If you're going from sunny weather into a thunderstorm, into, oh, the road ended, we've got some gravel to go in, it's all there on a button, which is wonderful. The downside, somebody programmed all of those suspension settings into the ECU. So you have to live with what you've got. When it works, but when the oil ages out due to use, especially off-road use, then there's going to be a problem down the line for servicing frequency, in terms of you're going to have this oscillation in sport at 9 of 9. So the question would become, for me, and just because I'm asking that question, what's the stock fork oil? What is the stock shock oil? And what's the number for it, or the center Stokes, or the VI, viscosity index? Can I then bump that viscosity index up so that I can double or triple the service intervals and get much more range of damping for a longer period of time? Without tearing them apart, looking at how it all works, I can't say that. But could I try it? Is there anything wrong with, when you're out of damping in the front, taking the bike to the dealer and say, please use this oil instead of the oil specified in the manual? I would like to test to see what it does. Because at that point, you're defining what will work better for you, your environment, where you ride, and how long you ride for. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to make something better and meet your needs in a much, much longer duration of time between service intervals. So it's like every motorcycle, it doesn't matter what it is, there is that option to investigate fork and shock oil viscosity and change it either up or down.